Are we live? I think we're live. Hiya. It's lovely to be back on the virtual village hall page. If you've never seen one of these videos, my name is Rowan McCabe and I do poems. I'm actually going to be doing a special Valentine's Day themed poetry set for the next 15 minutes. But don't worry, right? I know the alarm bells are probably already ringing. It's not going to be like that. There's not a single sonnet? There's not a single sonnet even in this whole poetry set. And we're going to avoid the obvious, the cliche, the overly saccharine and cringy. And we're going to instead do a kind of more off-kilter Valentine's Day poetry set. Just to show you how cringy this is going to be. We're going to start with the first poem. It's a love poem, but it's actually addressed to my favourite ever music venue. It was called the Cooperage in Newcastle upon Tyne, where I live. It's actually the second oldest building in the whole city, so it was built in the 14th century. Only the castle itself is older, and you would assume a building like that would be, I don't know, maybe turned into a museum or something like that, but not the Cooperage in Newcastle. No, it was a bar that used to put on the most fantastic raves. And I thought, you know, at a time when we're all missing getting out to music venues, this could be a good place to start. And, you know, even if you never got to make it down to the Cooperage in Newcastle, I'm sure there is a venue that holds a similar place in your heart. This is called the Coop. This one is for the Cooperage. Its 14th century face. One that makes Shakespeare look like Harry Styles on his first birthday. Crisp white paint and ancient oak beams like some secluded inn out of Lord of the Rings. I wonder if they could have guessed 600 years ago at its conception that the Cooperage would be a venue for ravers to drop beats in. I spent hundreds of nights on those top 2 floors, scaled the vertical flight steps less wide than tall, twisted through its narrow door frames, black winding halls. It was like crazy golf in a haunted house. Up there, rooms just seemed to like appear out of nowhere. Like the architect had used a pineapple as a tape measure. Like the preferred local of MC Escher. Yes, I spent hundreds of nights dancing in that maze, but the best one by far was Ed Cox in 2008. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the musical genre that is clowncore. It's a fine concept, too often overlooked. It's jungle, drum and bass and gabba, mashed with gypsy folk and punk. It was always going to be weird, admittedly. But as an extra special treat, you got £1 off your entry if you came dressed like a clown freak. Well, there was baggy pants and neon hair as far as the eye could see. Like some dystopian circus set in 2063, the distorted bass shook the window panes so they vibrated about an inch each way. I didn't think they could take that kind of sonic strain in their old age, but they stayed in place. Just wobbling. Holographic. Like a hummingbird. Or a tractor having a fit. Clowns everywhere. They danced under the moon. Clowns everywhere, but no one had balloons. There was clowns with smiling faces under dripping wet face paint. There was clowns amongst the strobe lights pulling mental shapes. There was clowns in the seating area with glasses of Bacardi. There was clowns in the toilets queuing for a wee. There was clowns in the alley smoking on the ground. There was clowns hugging tightly saying, "Yeah, mate, you're pure sound." Where's all the sound clowns now, eh? The Cooperage was doomed to rot the day they built posh flats behind it, and the residents made too many noise complaints. But I have a dream based on one simple fact, that the Cooperage was there first, and the Cooperage is going to be there last. I dream of a day when the killjoys have moved away, somewhere killjoys are meant to stay, like Mars or the countryside, where they can complain to the local authority about the sun rising too early, or the excessive amount of stars in the night sky. I dream of a day when the rickety oak doors are thrown wide, when they turn back on those shoddy festive lights, when the front gets covered with fresh paint and the letters above the door get replaced and the mad rhythms echo in the valleys around as they send back the wide-eyed, sweaty, freaky dancing clowns. There we have it there. Hello everyone who's sending messages in there. Oh, hello from Boston. Hi Judy. Hi from Loughborough there. From Pernima. Nice to see you all. Yeah, little poem there. Little love poem to my favourite venue. Moving on from a love poem about a place, I'd like to do a love poem to my favourite word now, actually. A couple of years back, I was asked to write something for National Poetry Day on the theme of change. And the idea was that like the local Newcastle radio would do a call out to residents in the northeast, and they'd kind of really push it on the radio and on social media, and I would ask questions on social media, and we would ask the general public to write in or phone in or whatever, and give us some suggestions for poems on the theme of change. And in the end, one person got in touch. It was my friend Don. He asked for a poem about the death of local dialect. So I decided to write a poem about my favourite Geordie word. It's called Muggle Poem. Don't worry if you don't know what the word Muggle means. You're about to find out. It goes like this. Oh, who doesn't love the way Geordies talk? With vowels so inflated and happy. With souvenir shops stuffed with key rings and mugs boasting slogans like way I and canny. 'Cause tourists take joy in this strange sound. That's why call centres thrive in this region, but experts are scared that within 30 years these words will end up in museums. From Ofsted school missions that enforce standard diction to employers who want the Queen's speech, it seems terms like how might soon be erased by an age that finds them obsolete. And there's some who believe it's just progress. This dialect's nothing but trouble, but if it's resigned to the scrap heap of time, the word that I'd miss most is muckle. Now, muckle, for those not acquainted, is a term that means big, by the by, but it's so much more glorious than large or enormous. It implies something freakish in size. For example, consider a monster. You could say he's gigantic, Godzilla, but you'd grasp so much more of his massive proportions if you called him a pure muckle lizard. Though in truth, stick it in any sentence, the value's increased at least double. Look at Dave's muckle face. That's a muckle car chase. I'm not paying that gas bill. It's muckle. Consider the great works of literature improved once the word was put in. Imagine Charles Dickens' muckle expectations or Mark Twain's muckle briefing. And I know these sounds aren't always helpful. They confuse all my friends in the south, but I'm scared of how dull this world would become if each one of us used the same mouth. No, let's cherish these homegrown devices, the quirks and the way that we speak. Because we're all part of one muckle planet, my friends, but with differences make us unique. There we go. Hi, Linda. She says, "Hi, there's Linda." And I reply with a hi. Yeah, I don't really think this would be a Valentine's Day poetry set if I didn't at some point at least talk about a relationship between two humans. You can't really get away with it, can you? Like a love poem to a building, a love poem to a favourite word. Like at some point we are going to have to address the elephant in the room, aren't we? And I think this is probably that point. So I'm gonna share a poem about a relationship between two people. It's not about me. It's about someone who lives, well, not too far away from here in Newcastle, actually. So, one project that I was working on for the past 5 years was called door-to-door poetry. So I knock on strangers' doors and offer to write a poem for them for free on any subject of their choosing. And I went all around England doing this. I went to... how many places? I went to 18 places altogether and wrote 60-odd poems. But it all started here in Newcastle. And one of the first places I went to was a council estate quite near where I live called the Biker Wall. And I think it would be fair to say it's got a bit of a bad reputation, the Biker Wall. Like, I told a police officer I was planning on taking my project there, and she advised us very strongly not to do it. And then she said, well, if you do, carry some pepper spray and don't take any valuables. So as you can imagine, I was pretty scared. I'm not gonna lie, I was terrified. Like by the time I got to the Biker Wall, like my heart was racing, my arms were shaking. And I knocked on the door, and this guy answered in like a peak baseball cap with bright blue eyes and a Newcastle United shirt. And I started to do a little pitch to kind of explain that I was there and I wanted to write a poem for him. And so I was kind of going through this pitch and explaining what I was doing. And the whole time I was doing it, he just stared at us like completely deadpan. I had no idea what this person was making of my offer. And I got to the end and I said, thanks very much for listening. Well, what's your name? And he said, Carl. And I said, okay, Carl, well, I'd love to write a poem for you. So you tell us, what's important to you? What are your interests? And he said, getting wrecked. And it felt like this was a kind of testing the boundaries thing, you know, like to see what I was going to do next. And I said, okay, Carl, I mean, I could write a poem about getting wrecked for you. I mean, whatever's important to you, really. And it seemed like it was, yeah, there was a pause and like something in his face changed. And after what felt like around about a minute, he said, will you write us one about how much I love my girlfriend? And the conversation had gone from hardcore to sentimental in about 3 seconds. So I did write Carl a poem about how much he loves his girlfriend. It's called The First Date, and it goes like this. It seemed a pretty reasonable start. A way to show your true love, that you care. So what's this lady called who holds your heart, the poet asked. Carl answered, she's called Claire. And tell us, Carl, where did you both depart on your first date? And what was it like there? Well, that one's clear as yesterday, Carl said. The place we went on our first date was Greg's. Was Greg's. Was Greg's? Carl answered, the same way. That's seriously what you want to put. Was it one of those Greg's Moments cafes? Carl shook his head. Okay, was it any good? Carl nodded and told him about the way the butterflies did backflips in his gut and how, the perfect gentleman and date, he'd walked Claire to her door with a steak bake. It seemed a strange place for true love to grow and not a topic fit for Elton John. But then what did this humble poet know? I mean, they'd been together for so long. So the wordsmith said that he would go. And in a few weeks he'd be back along. Then off he went to spend a lot of time thinking of some way to make this rhyme. But that night in the happy couple's house, as they watched the telly on their own, sitting up, Carl told Claire all about the poet who had visited their home. And how he'd made a promise he'd write out the first date off to Greg's into a poem. But at this point, Claire jumped up fast and shrieked, but we never even went to Greg's, you freak. To Carl, this change of mood was a surprise. And all these years he'd never seen Claire shout, but now The fires of hell burned in her eyes, though he was right. He knew without a doubt. Okay, he said. If that's a pack of lies, could you tell us where we first went out? Claire paused a while, then said, after she'd thunk, the pictures. To see Alvin and the Chipmunks? Alvin and the Chipmunks, are you mental? I've never seen that film in all my days. We went out to a Greg's, man, plain and simple, said Carl now, getting equally irate. They fought like Afghan rebels, throwing cutlery and smashing plates, and shouted all night long from separate beds, Greg's, Chipmunks, Greg's, Chipmunks, Greg's, Chipmunks, Greg's. Well, soon 2 weeks had spun around the clocks, and these two had really fell from grace. They hadn't smiled. The silence never stopped except to argue where this date took place. They'd split the DVDs in their own box, decided they would go their separate ways and wave goodbye to all their life as lovers, when they heard a ringing at the buzzer. That poet's here again, Carl, Claire told him. I've seen him through the spy hole in the door. Why did you ever say you'd let him in? Well, life was so much happier before. And what happened in the past's not worth this stressing. The future is the place that I live for. And Carl agreed. So hand in hand they left to beat the stupid poet half to death. Because I didn't really get beat to death in the biker war. I added that in for comic effect. Oh, thank you very much for the kind words there, Steve. Yeah, so I'm gonna do one more poem for you, and then I'm gonna go. Before I do, if you're interested in checking out any more of my stuff, you can go to rowanthepoet.com. Or I'm on social media as well. On Facebook, it's Rowan McCabe Poet. And on Twitter, it's at Rowan McCabe. So yeah, I'm going to do one more for you. Yeah, carrying on this kind of Valentine's Day theme, but trying to get a bit out of cliche. I thought I'd finish with something on the idea of self-love. Because, you know, they say you can't love anyone else unless you really love yourself, don't they? And in that vein, I'm going to leave you on this one. It's called Forgetting. Thanks very much for listening. You've been lovely. It goes like this. I forgot what it felt like to stand up. I forgot what it felt like to breathe. I forgot I'm not made of ideas. I'm made of bones and meat. And I'm quite heavy. When I'm asleep, it takes 2 people to carry us, at least. I forgot that. Even if tomorrow becomes a package that's smashed on delivery, today is still worth celebrating for no other reason than I made it. Above us is the gravity of uncountable suns. Clothes sticking to washing machine drums. Circular equations solving themselves endlessly. I forgot what it felt like. Not to push against everything. Let yourself sway beneath this ocean like the long green fingers of seaweed by some citric coral reef, because I've been grinding my teeth. I've been clutching tickets that don't matter. I've been laughing because everyone else is, and holding back in the moments I should be pouring myself into. I forgot what it felt like to see instead of looking, to be instead of becoming, to know instead of thinking, to hold instead of touching, and it made the earth feel like it was frozen when all the while it had been spinning. Thank you very much, virtual village haulers. I will catch you later. Look after yourselves, stay warm, stay safe.